I'm Michael Pearl, and this is your daily Bible Manna. We're in Romans chapter 3. Now, he just gave this long argument last time about how you could be a Jew and keep the law and be circumcised and have all this outward righteousness and miss it, while a Gentile, which doesn't have the Bible, never been exposed to it, would keep the law of God written in his heart, written in the sky, written in his own religion, and be acceptable to God. So that poses a question, and that's what he starts off with in chapter 3, verse 1. What advantage then has the Jew? Well, the way you're talking, Paul, doesn't make any difference that we've taken the laws of God and the ceremonies he's given us and the temple worship and kept the law and just like he told us to. Then what's the whole point of it? He said, much every way, chiefly because that unto them were committed the oracles of God. He said, the advantage of being a Jew is because you have the oracles of God, the spoken words of God. The Bible is God's spoken words. And he said that's an advantage. Why is that an advantage? Well, you're being advantaged right now just by hearing this taught. You're getting some clarity on God and what he requires. Now, he sort of changes the subject. For if some did not believe, the Jews, shall their unbelief make the faith of God without effect? The faith of God is used that term as a faith as a body of revealed truth, a way of salvation. He said, if the Jews didn't believe, which most of them didn't, did that then make void, that nullify the whole program of God? Because he came to save the Jews. So they didn't believe. They turned him down, most of them. So does that mean God failed? God forbid. Yea, let God be true and every man a liar, as it is written, that thou mightest be justified in thy sayings and mightest overcome when thou art judged. So he quotes an Old Testament passage and says, absolutely not. God is going to be justified in what he's doing and the way he's done it. Now, he's asked a question here that you hear on the streets a lot. But if our unrighteousness commend the righteousness of God, what shall we say? Is God unrighteous who taketh vengeance? In other words, if God gets glory from this world, from the Jews and the Gentiles, both from those who receive him and those who don't, if he gets glory by the Jews, many of them rejected Christ and are going to be damned. In the meantime, many Gentiles believed the truth and they're going to be saved. So God is glorified in saving those Gentiles. And so the question is, if our unrighteousness commend the righteousness of God, if God appears more righteous because we're unrighteous, is God unrighteous who taketh vengeance? So if God set this whole scenario up, kicked this program into gear so that he's getting glory from this conflict, this battle, where some will be lost and some will be saved, is God righteous? Is that the right way to do things? Is he unrighteous? I said, I speak as a man. God forbid that I should say he's unrighteous, for then how would he judge the world? So Paul assumes that God is bound by moral law, his own. In other words, he's bound by his own nature. He's going to be consistent with his nature, which respects absolute righteousness. He said God wouldn't be qualified to judge the world if he's guilty of this sin of being unequal in his judgments. For the truth of God, he asked again, hath more abounded through my lie to his glory, why yet am I also judged a sinner? She's asked the question, if I tell a lie and God comes along and extols the truth, and there's a contrast between my lying and his truth so that he's glorified, looks like I've served a purpose. I mean, hadn't I been beneficial to God? because God gets to express his glory by the contrast between my lie and his righteousness. So I'm playing my part. There's people out there sinning who think they're playing their part. Now, he's showing the fallacy of that. He said, if that's the case, why yet am I judged a sinner? But rather not, as we be slanderously reported. Paul said this is a slander on the truth. And as some affirm that we say, quote, some say, we say, let us do evil that good may come. There are professing Christians who think that they can sin on Saturday, confess it on Sunday, and glorify God. The way God will be glorified is in damning them. And then they would say, well, then I served a purpose. I sinned on Saturday, confessed on Sunday. God didn't accept my confession. He damned me, and he's glorified. So I'm serving my part. That's an evil mind, an evil heart that thinks that way. What then? Are we better than they? Now, what he's just expressed is disgusting. What he's just described is absolutely repulsive. It's offensive to our sense of right and wrong. It's offensive to God. Now, then he turns the finger we're pointing at the people who think this crazy way. He turns it around and he says, what, are we better than they? So he asks the question, okay, you say, I would never do what you just described, saying God is, that I should sin so God will be glorified, that I'm serving my part. I would never do that. He said, okay, are you better than the people who do say that? Are we better than they? No, in no wise. For we before proved, both Jews and Gentiles, that they're all under sin. When did he prove that? In the first 2 chapters, where he discussed the light coming to everyone and God giving everyone an equal opportunity to respond to the light in order to gain eternal life. Then he showed that we've all failed. As it is written, there's none righteous, no, not one, quoting Psalm. There's none that understandeth, there's none that seeketh after God. So he's bringing this thing down to a head, and he said, look, if you did what you ought to do, if you walked in righteousness and holiness, if you were a good person, you'd be saved. And even if you're a Gentile with no knowledge of the Bible, if you did what you ought to do, you'd be saved. And if you're a Jew with all this knowledge and you don't do what you're supposed to do, you won't be saved. That's the facts of the matter, bottom line. But he said, we before proved Jew and Gentile under sin. There's none righteous, no, not one. It doesn't take much Bible reading to discover that you're a great sinner. I realize more now than I did 40 years ago that I'm a great sinner. Now, I've not fallen into some dastardly sin that would look bad on the internet, but I know my heart, and I know my selfishness, I know my laziness, I know my indifference, I know my desire to consume, my lack of giving. I know all those things in part, and I know I'm unworthy. There's none righteous, no, not one. There's none that understandeth. I've had people say to me, I don't understand it. And I said, well, that's a sin too. There's none that understandeth. There's none that seeketh after God. Seek and you'll find. You don't seek, you won't find. A lot of people don't seek. They just sit back and criticize, sit back and find fault, sit back and make excuses. They're all gone out of the way. They're together become unprofitable. Together become unprofitable. You have an ink pen, a ballpoint pen, runs out of ink, it's unprofitable. What do? You throw it away. We've become unprofitable to God. There's none that doeth good, no, not one. Their throat is an open sepulchre. Said you look down there where they're speaking, it's like a tomb. Their tongues have used deceit. Say, I don't lie, but I do deceive. The poison of asp is under their lips. Ooh. That's a snake with the venom in little bags here, waiting to be injected. And the way we talk about each other, the things we say, whose mouth is full of cursing, I don't curse, and bitterness. You got bitterness in your mouth? And then he goes on and describes their sin, bunch of things. So Paul has established that we're all under sin, that we've all failed, that we've all fallen short of our own standards that we have created in our own heart and mind and conscience through nature, through natural revelation, and through the Bible. So all have failed. Now, again, this is kind of negative, but you go into the doctor with a pain in your belly, he x-rays you, comes back and says you've got a tumor. That doesn't feel good. But it's the first step to getting cut out and being healed. I'm going to stop there and we'll pick it up later.